Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. For those of you who are regulars on the Wednesday Meet the VCs, you're probably wondering who I am. My name is Gina Longmire, and I will be taking over for Dan Dotto. I have very big shoes to fill, but hopefully I will be able to do him justice. Just wanted to start today with a couple quick touch points with regards to site maintenance. We will run about 40 to 60 minutes. Any questions that come in will come in through the question and answer period, but feel free to chat amongst yourselves and drop any names and information in the chat box. We want this to be a networking experience for all of you, as well as an educational point. As I'm sure a lot of you know, early growth in the past, but what I'm sure you don't know is that we have now merged with Escalon. This is an amazing merger as we both share the same mission. And that mission is that we want to help take care of your businesses and the essential business behind the scenes so that you can focus on growing your team and your partnerships. With the merger, we can now cover more than just finances. We can now help with everything in the back end of the offices, as well as your financial and accounting. In addition, we will now have a global footprint, which is absolutely incredible because we will be able to help more people and do more for all of their businesses. But what happens doesn't happen alone. We have to thank our amazing partners who help us put all of these together. Much like we want to be a partner of yours, our partners have made a lot of this possible. We're going to start with introducing a few of those partners. The first is going to be Recreate. Recreate is a commercial real estate advising company that's helping tenants return back to the workplace safely. To tell you more about this is going to be Dylan Peters. Dylan?
Hello, everybody. My name is Dylan Peters. I'm with the Tenant Advisory Group at Recreate. Recreate is a full-service commercial real estate firm that helps startups as well as Fortune 500 companies with all of their real estate planning and strategy needs. In refreshing contrast to traditional real estate companies that generate most of their revenue by representing landlords, Recreate eliminates this conflict of interest by only representing office tenants. We're currently helping companies return to an office by identifying and negotiating for many high-value, fully furnished sublease options. We've contributed to the growth of companies such as Metromile, Uber, Fast, Molecule, and SiriusXM Radio. If you need an office, come talk to us. Once again, my name is Dylan Peters with Recreate Commercial Real Estate.
Thank you so much, Dylan. Next up is Inspirity. We all know what is a company without an amazing HR team, and here to tell us a little bit more about Inspirity is Kevin Baskett.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, technology is great, but then you need the people to carry out that vision. So kind of Inspirity jumps in from founders sweat equity to great, we raise some funds, now I get paid, to hiring your friends, growing and starting to gain that employee count as you grow sales and expand. So Inspirity was founded in 1986. So we're a true HR company. We help create what you guys might have heard the PEO world. So we have traditional PEO. We help small companies. We grow, scale, escalate, succession planning. So let's raise it, grow it. And if you want to move forward, we got a solution. So I'm here to help you. Let me know if I can assist, answer questions, and I'm just part of the partnership. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Next up, we have Lighter Capital. For those of you that attend this regularly, Lighter is no stranger to you. They're the largest non-dilutive funding source for capital for startups. And here to tell us more about that is Zach.
Hey, thanks for the intro, and really happy to be here with all our partners today. Lighter Capital, we've been around over a decade. We primarily provide post-revenue financing to businesses doing $250,000 to typically $10 million in ARR. That can be via a term loan or our original revenue-based financing product. It's completely non-dilutive. We don't take financial covenants or personal guarantees, and we generally lend 2 to 4 times a company's MRR.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And last but definitely not least, and like we said before, what is any great company without HR? Same thing goes for a legal team. We have Perkins Coie, and here to tell you more about that is Paul Navarro.
Hello, thank you. Yeah, my name is Paul Navarro. I'm a counsel at Perkins Coie in the Emerging Companies and Venture Capital Group. I think of us, we are the long-term partners for all things startup. We have a deep bench that particularly focuses on this unique area of law. We work with folks who have back of the envelope ideas, help develop those ideas, protect the IP, find great partners like Lighter Capital, find ways to grow intelligently and safely. I spent a lot of my time with young founders, exploring, and developing their future dream, right? So we are a full service law firm who, knows kind of all of the ins and outs of the life cycle and the crazy roller coaster that is the startup life. So, for anybody who has any questions, concerns in that area, please feel free, reach out. We're always happy to chat. Again, Paul Navarro, Emerging Companies at Perkins Coie.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you so much to all of our partners. And you are welcome to hop off at this point as we head into kind of the last part before we hear from our amazing VC. And as we all know, oops, I'm going to scroll through, excuse me. As we all know, tax season is coming up. And just so you know, we have an amazing promotion coming up with $500 off your 2020 tax prep. All you need to do is go to earlygrowth.com/tax promo. And the deadline is 30 days from today. Finally, I'm going to introduce our amazing moderator today, Mr. David Mashudy. He's been at Early Growth for 2 years. He's our NorCal marketing manager. He previously was a finance analyst, and he has successfully thru-hiked the Pacific Crest Trail in 2015. Couldn't get that out, could I? So welcome, Mr. Mashudy.
Thanks, Gina. I appreciate it. And thanks again to all the partners for help setting this up. We really couldn't do this without you guys. I guess you can take off the PowerPoint and we'll just go directly into a conversation between Luis and myself. Really looking forward to this conversation, have been for a while. Luis comes to us with a broad set of experience from being an entrepreneur to investing in the corporate arm of Samsung, as well as starting Salkantay Ventures. So really excited to get more insight into your background. Luis, do you want to give a quick thumbnail as to how you got involved in investing and how your career has progressed, and then we can dive in from there?
Sure, absolutely. And, like many people in California, I came to, I immigrated to the US. I came from Peru and, studied university here, got really into technology, just happened to be the 90s, right? I think one of the first things that happened in my freshman year is like, oh, by the way, there's this new thing called Mosaic. And it's a browser, and since then I got more and more into technology. Even in my earlier jobs as an engineer, like leveraging technology to build, building management systems, high complex technology solutions. But my intro to investing was really, I had an interest after I went to business school. You keep hearing about this like venture capital. I was a very technical person. I didn't even know what a balance sheet was or cash flow statements. So that's why I went to business school and keep hearing about this venture capital. It sounded really exciting, which is, that intersection between finance and technology and entrepreneurship, and, just always stayed interested in that space. To me, my intro to investing was a little bit almost by accident. I joined Google in the, early mid 2000s, and Google at that stage was growing like crazy. And not just like growth, but exponential, almost chaotic growth. And opportunities would pop up, and literally somebody would have to go around the room and say like, okay, who can do this? Like, who has time to do it? Who wants to do it? And it happened that around that time, Google.org was getting started. So Google.org is a philanthropic arm of Google. I helped out with, kind of setting it up, a lot of the Rails, a lot of the infrastructure within it, and then they hired a team. But as the team grew, there was need for people in the investments team. So I joined the investments team, ended up actually leading that investments team. That was the late 2000, late 2008, 2009, a lot of investments in health tech, climate tech, back then it was called green tech or clean tech, global access, technology solutions in emerging markets. And I could really, really dove into that whole space. A lot of the investments that we made, like I said, had like, not just financial goals, but also social impact. And that's something that I think has been really important. And nowadays with the whole, explosion in ESG is becoming more and more relevant. So that was my intro to investments, and then grew that team, grew that practice. Also started after I left Google, started a company which was then acquired by Google, but part of it was acquired by Google, part of it was acquired by a group called 1776, and then joined the corporate VC arm of Samsung. It's called Samsung Next. Really cool group making investments in IoT, data, security, biometrics, fintech, and an awesome space. 5 years ago, actually, I mentioned before, I'm from Peru. I returned to Peru for family reasons. My father passed away. My mom hadn't been by herself since she was like 22. So I kind of went back and help out. And, I think once you start becoming an entrepreneur, you continually an entrepreneur. I started a company, and that company is called Certica. I was the founding, one of the founders, founding CEO. Now, last year, the company had over $50 million in revenue, already cash flow positive, 200 employees, 10 offices in 6 countries doing like cloud management for large and medium enterprises around the region. Salkantay, and you mentioned, David, if you're a hiker, Salkantay Trail is one of the most famous hikes in the Andes. There's an Inca Trail, which is, I've done many times. It's easy. The Salkantay Trail is the technical one. So if you get a chance to do it, it's an awesome experience. So Salkantay is an early stage fund launched almost exactly a year ago. We already held the first close and we're already making investments, but it's a $25 million early stage fund focused in between seed and Series A, targeting Latin entrepreneurs, both in the US and in Latin America. And again, going back to my pedigree, really focused on impact. So the areas that we're investing are sectors where there's, what I like to say, it's like a natural impact already happening, which are what I call digital essential services, which are like, the X-techs, fintech, edtech, health tech, focused on access, particularly, access to banking, access to financing, access to education, particularly during, pandemic situations. A lot of focus on SMBs. SMBs are in every economy, they're the bulk of the, what I call like the corporate population, but they're severely underserved in terms of technology. And nowadays with cloud computing or software as a service, there's really no reason for them not to access, best-in-class CRM, data management, financial, projections, et cetera, and also a big focus on infrastructure. So, it's a region that has grown exponentially. It's the most urbanized region in the world. But, cities have exploded, commerce has exploded, particularly between the US and Latin America. So there's a lot of opportunities for logistics, transportation, like freight forwarding between the US and Mexico or US and Latin America. So those areas where we're investing. Again, it's a $25 million fund, early stage, and really focused on Latin entrepreneurs, both in the US and in Latin America.
Thanks for that overview. That's awesome. And I had no idea that it was a trail, so I'll be adding that to my long list.
Yeah, it's one of the best. Yeah.
It's an extra one on the bucket list as if I didn't have enough. So, okay, great. I mean, I definitely want to dive into the fund, but before doing that, one thing that I really wanted to touch upon is, all of your experience kind of leading into being an investor. You mentioned a lot of it, but, in terms of being an entrepreneur and the companies that you started, the exits that you've been a part of, how has that helped you become an investor and kind of led to your success in guiding these founders through the process?
No, that's a great point. So my first experience as an investor before being a founder, and you realize later the just kind of basic mistakes or misconceptions that you have, misconceptions you make or misconceptions that you have, right? From how to provide support, value, what's your real role, particularly as a junior. I started as like the junior principal or the junior person in that relation, all the way to what you really be looking for. A lot of entrepreneurs that go into venture capital have this like, oh, I know how to run this company, or I would do it this way. So that's the way, that I'm gonna like, and board meetings, people, you can say things and they're interpreted in many ways, but you have to be really careful on how to communicate. So that's one thing that I, learned, and kind of the switching between being an entrepreneur and being an investor. The other thing is like how do you stay on top of the companies? What metrics are really relevant? Where to push, when to question. There's entrepreneur friendly, but I've also seen there's like almost like entrepreneur, like carte blanche, which isn't really the right way to do it. So, it's a lot of it questioning, figuring out what's the, with them, not giving them an answer, but asking the right questions. And at the end of the day, one thing that I've done in my years here is like built a great network. People that I've worked with or I've started companies with now run, private equity firms, venture capital firms, product teams at Facebook's, PayPal's, Google's. So a lot of it is, hey, you need something, you need help. I can't provide it all myself, but I know the head of sales at this particular product, they can give you an answer on, what are the right metrics? What are the right sales cycles? Are you compensating your salespeople correctly for closing multi-annual contracts, or should you do it another way?
Yeah, and that kind of leads into the next question too. I noticed from looking at your LinkedIn and the bio, the amount of board seats that you've been on and taken. What should companies and founders be thinking about when handing out board seats? And what makes a good board member? I think you alluded to a little bit there with some of the knowledge and the doors that you can open. But what should companies be thinking about when given a board sheet or when investors are asking for a board seat first and foremost?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think a lot of people have gone to this, like the more the merrier. A board, the board of directors is at the end it has two roles, right? And the main one is at the end of like a fiduciary role in making sure that the company is, acting ethically or is meeting their obligations and, it's in the right path and it's running out of capital and it's going to be able to support itself and its, obligations to employees, to clients, tax, etc. That's the basics. There's also like the strategic discussions that should happen in every board meeting. Are we in the right space? Are we selling correctly? Can you help me take a look at the numbers? And those should be really managed very carefully because there's like I said, a lot of entrepreneurs that are in venture will start, and it's okay, you dig into the numbers, but make sure that you do it in a way that is, supportive, you question, you don't try to, it's a typical, I did it this way, so you should do it this way. It's, asking and making sure that it's a good conversation in both directions.
Have you seen situations where like board members weren't being productive in kind of their feedback and guidance for the company? And is there a way that companies should think about giving kind of a board observer seat or a temporary board position before actually, getting someone on the board full time?
Yeah, but I think if you're an early stage company, I would be cautious in giving out board seats. You can have advisors. You can always have advisors. You can always have mentors. Which are not board members, because as investors come in, they will demand a board seat. It's and they need to do that because LPs expect them to do that, like happens to us. So having too many board members before racing around is completely counterproductive. You should have, like I said, you can have advisors, you can have the steering, like a steering board or a board of advisors or even mentors that will help you, and having those conversations there. At a board, there's good and bad board members, there's good and bad investors, there's good and bad entrepreneurs. I think, in general, it's also a tense sense of like what the CEO, how does he manage the board, which I think it's also a very, very important skill set that a lot of CEOs, especially first-time entrepreneurs, have not developed. They've never been in that situation. A lot of it is like, making sure what to take out of the conversation. And it happened even when I was at Google. Like you're in a meeting and suddenly Eric Schmidt says like, and this is a true story, right? I wonder what happened in, that weekend in Turkey. Why is revenue down? And we literally spent like the entire weekend analyzing logs, doing analysis. And it turned out it was like, something because Easter had been in March in one year and moved to April the other year. And so I was running like the data, one of the data teams there. Like we had not modeled for that because, it's just something you don't think about. And then, massive amounts of work and ended up like, when we presented it, like we did all the work on the weekend, presented on Monday, and I was like, oh, okay. Oh yeah, sure. Why, that wasn't a big deal. So a lot of it is creating work by saying things. I was in who was a CEO, founder of Aruba Systems, and he said like an observer observes. You know, and a lot of like, you know, also junior VCs go in and they're very eager to like, hey, I want to say this, I want to provide value. And he's like, no, you know, observe, everything you say creates work. Just be careful on how you communicate things.
That's a good point. Yeah, how to differentiate between the noise and what's actually valuable feedback and managing the board.
And one thing that I've seen works really well is at the end of the meeting, before it's adjourned, saying like, okay, here's the expectations that we're going to come with by next board meeting. Or, you know, by next week, I'm going to send you this, and make sure what the expectations are. Because people talk and, you know, will be an open discussion, which is great, but make sure what's a discussion and what's a request.
Yeah, setting proper expectations, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, no, that's definitely helpful. I appreciate you diving into kind of your experience on the board side. I think one other thing that's interesting too is your experience working as a corporate investor and, you know, a venture capitalist. Walk me through like what the differences are between being a CVC and a private VC, and what have you learned from that? You know, and then I can dive in a little bit deeper to some of the deals that you saw on the CVC side.
Yeah, I mean, when you're in a board and when you're with the company, you need to be on the side of the company. And especially if you're taking board seats, then, you know, you might be even getting into, and if you're not, you might be getting into, you know, fiduciary responsibility issues. Again, when you're the company, you're with the company. You then, you know, kind of help broker that relation between the company and the corporate parent. You know, act as a, you know, could be a broker, communicator, enabler. But it's very important, particularly in like, you know, professional, very well-run corporate venture groups like, you know, Google Ventures, Salesforce Ventures, Samsung Next. I mean, I can think of many others. Which have a venture role. What I've seen becomes a real problem is when it's the corporate that makes the investment without having a venture practice, and they put in, you know, in the board or as a board observer, somebody from, you know, from the product team who might or might not be working on something similar, who might or might not have a preference for a, you know, one vendor or another. So that becomes an issue, but really well-run corporate VC groups, and if you're, you know, considering investment from one, ask them, you know, do you take board seats? What's your line of reporting? Do you report to the corporate parent, or do you report to venture? And, you know, how do you make the decisions? Do you have the ability to follow on? Even if your company ended up not doing the work with Samsung or Google or Salesforce, we continue to invest. A lot of corporate VCs will make one investment and they say, we only make one investment, which is fine. Just be open about it. And make sure you ask these questions before you take in a venture. Also, one thing, I mean, a corporate investor will not make you. Oh, we get investment from Samsung, and now we're going to be in every single Samsung Galaxy phone. Not necessarily. Product, the same way that investors make the decision independently, the product team will make the decision independently. They might pick a competitor, and they might, you know, decide not to go with your product. So it's just very important to have that conversation up front.
Okay, that's great. Okay, diving into Salkantay and getting into the fund specifically, you mentioned it's a $25 million seed to Series A fund. Walk me through like what the average check size is, how many investments you're planning to make out of the fund, and then do you reserve some capital for follow-on investment as well?
Yeah, we invest anywhere between $100K to $1 million in our first check into the company. Again, depends if it's a seed round, or if it's a Series A, if we're leading, if we're not leading, we're following. So we have a pretty broad range. We do reserve capital for follow-ons. Right now we have 4 companies in the portfolio. It'll be 5 by the end of this month. We already have a couple of term sheets that we're negotiating. And, you know, the total size of the portfolio should be about 15 companies. Like I mentioned, we invest in Latin entrepreneurs. We've made 4 investments. 3 companies are based in the US, 1's based in Mexico, but all the companies are, you know, serving Latin customers. Some of them are serving like the US Hispanic market. Some are serving like the, you know, Mexico local. One of our fintechs is Payroll Advance, a company called Mino in Mexico City. And then we have companies that are based in the US with Latin entrepreneurs, but have either a global market or a regional play. And it can be one's an English learning service out of Boston called Slang. Awesome company, it's growing like crazy. And what it does, it makes these courses through AI. I mean, they don't have people building courses. It automatically creates courses that are focused on that particular industry. So there's like English for machine learning, English for motorcycle repair. And depending on what your company does, it creates a corpus around your business. And the other company is called Torre. Torre is it's a global recruiting service for remote work. They launched right before the pandemic, and the pandemic has probably been their biggest salesperson, right? It should take all the commissions for the last year.
Okay. Do you guys typically require board seat, or is that something that's pretty flexible?
It's flexible. I mean, again, it depends. As long as it checks us if we're leading, if we're following. We do like to be very involved with the company. Like I said, we've built out these services where we have companies that are friends of ours, or we have companies in that we've invested in before, or entrepreneurs that we've worked with before that can help them. Anything from design, customer success, sales, sales metrics, etc.
Okay. Yeah, I think anyone would be lucky with having you on the board when you look through the amount of board seats that you've been on. So a lot of value that you provide there, I'm sure, with your experience as an entrepreneur. Walk me through like the difference in a seed deal versus a Series A deal, and kind of the diligence that goes into that.
Yeah, I mean, there's basic diligence that's made at every stage, which is, does the company say who they are? Do they have, is the stockholders who they say they are? In seed, most likely they will not have significant transaction volume or traction. So a lot of it is, hey, let's look at the product, let's look at the team, let's look at the space, and there's that combination between, the founding team, the market, and the solution or product or propuesta, like the solution that you're proposing, does it make sense? Right. In an early stage, you can have 2 out of the 3. You always need to have team, and you always need to have the sector. So the product might not be fully there, but at least you know what you're going to build. So that's at early stage. For Series A, and one thing we've noticed, I was kind of half joking, there's like 7 stages now between seed and A. There's soil, pre-seed, seed, post-seed, pre-A, and A. So again, we've invested in what's called a Series Seed expansion, or before Series A round. The closer you get to an A, you need to be able to demonstrate unit economics. They might not be like the best unit economics, but at least you know what they are, you're tracking them, and you have a plan for taking them to where you think they need to be. Traction, if you're selling through channel, you already have channel partnerships set up. If you're selling directly, you already have a sales team in place, already transactioning and building, relations and renewals. So you'll have data, because seed, you can sell the story. By A, I think you need to sell the data.
Okay, no, that's helpful. What does the decision-making process look like for you? Like from introduction to diligence and then to receiving a term sheet? What would a founder expect when working with you and the turnaround time associated with that?
I mean, it's kind of hard to tell, because turnaround time also means like, when will we meet? Are you in the middle of fundraise? In which case, I mean, we've done fast turnarounds. If it's a company that, hey, we knew about this, we just didn't know that you were raising, and we didn't catch up, so let's do something. Or you can even take like years, I'll say years, maybe like a year. Hey, you're doing awesome things, but you're too early for us. Or they say, I just raced around, I'm not going to race my next round for a while, but let's keep in touch. So it's kind of hard to tell when they're like, from when to when. But once we decide to make an investment, it usually, we close in a couple of weeks. It's pretty fast.
Okay. What should founders be thinking about when reaching out to you? I mean, do you typically take cold introductions? If someone reaches out via email, is it always a warm introduction? Have you made investments to someone that's reached out cold?
Yeah. One thing I've done, it's in my LinkedIn and in my Twitter, I post periodically open office hours, like 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours every Monday, I think, is just open. Anybody can sign up. Potential entrepreneur. I have had students sign up. I actually had an LP. We closed a very small commitment, and somebody just like signed up for an office hour and said like, hey, you know, I saw what you guys are doing. I didn't know how to get a hold of you, and let's start talking, right? So I think just being open, it's been I mean, it works for everything. You know, there's always this gateways, and people try to build gateways or barriers. I think a lot of them don't make much sense, and especially, and think about it. I mean, nowadays we're all stuck at home. It's hard to meet people. Normal or pre-pandemic times, you would not be at a conference, and you know, somebody can just, you know, make, you know, the sort of cold call. It's like a cold intro saying, hey, I'm so and so, I'm working on so, and then you start a conversation. So
Yeah, that was one of my questions too, is like, how has the decision making and vetting process kind of changed with COVID? You know, I'm sure that you've gotten used to meeting people over Zoom in this format, but have you, you know, gone as far as going out to visit, and has that kind of slowed down the process, or, you know, inversely sped it up?
yeah, I mean, so the investments that we've made, half of the companies I've never met in person. Right, and I think it's actually made them faster because, for example, one of our investments in Miami, I would have had to go to Miami, you know, as part of the process and meet with them and spend time with them. Now it can all be done via Zoom. You know, same thing with Boston. Two of the companies, I already knew the founder from before. So that was an easy, you know, that's a relation that we've had before. I knew him from his previous company. So that one was kind of on the other extreme. But one thing that I've noticed is, you know, and I was talking to a friend of mine who's, he runs one of the startup practices at a big law firm, is like, these days, I think we've given ourselves so much extra work. Like literally I'm working, you know, you've gone from working 10 hours a day to 12 hours a day, just because what you've cut is like all the non-work stuff, like lunch, commute, coffee chats, you know, social time, like office social time. So nowadays you have so much more volume. I mean, literally seeing more companies per day than I've ever seen. I know there's a lot more activity in Silicon Valley, but you know, I've been doing, you know, technology since 2000, so I've seen the ups and downs. But the volume of companies that are being formed, the amount of, you know, capital that's available, the amount of you know, entrepreneurs that are starting new things, and the amount of interest in the space has exploded. So it's just a lot more volume coming through.
Okay. Okay. What's your policy on kind of investing in competing companies, and how would you kind of navigate that?
I mean, we're a small fund, so we try not to. I mean, but there's direct competition, and then there's companies in the similar space. So we do invest in companies in a similar space. They might have areas of like very small overlap, but you know what? It's a dynamic market. You know, we invest in companies. We don't invest in competing companies. What had happened to me, not in this fund, but in previous investment experience, like sometimes companies start seeing the same trend and end up in the same spot. In which case, you're an investor in both. You just need to like be able to find, you know, maybe one partner takes care of one company, the partner talks to the other company, but making sure that there's no, you know, the data going back and forth.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of equity, I see a question that's come in regarding equity. Do you have a minimum equity stake that you're taking with companies, or how do you approach that?
No, we're pretty flexible. I know there's been a lot of talk in Twitter about it. You know, there's like, what do you call, like a minimum requirements. For us, I mean, we're early stage investors. We take, you know, we're big believers in the company, and we make, you know, if we can make a bigger check, we'll take a bigger check, but we will not use that as a limiting factor, right? If we can't write a huge check into a company because they want to take capital from other investors, then, you know, it's the best thing for the company, and they're making that decision knowing that's going to be the best thing for them, is going to make them more successful. So we're happy to not have to take that check.
Okay, great. That offers a lot of flexibility, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
Walk me through an example or some talking points as to where you and Salkantay are able to add some disproportionate value to the companies with which you're working.
No, a lot of it has to do with market entry. So Latin America is, has a higher GDP than as a region than India. I mean, it's not a country, it's a region, but it's a very well integrated region. Common language, common business practices, a lot of like multi-Latinas, and a lot of it has to do with, it's a very similar continent. I mean, a lot of difference in between, but closer in a lot of ways than people think. And it's also a continent that is, for the most part, in the same time zone as the US. So a lot of it is your companies growing internationally to Brazil, to Mexico, to Colombia, to Peru, which are some of the fastest growing economies. That's something we help with. It's also companies from like Mexico going to Chile, companies from Chile going to the US. So kind of bridging that gap. There's been a lot of talk about it, like what's Latinx for us. It's like, it's one set of people, it's one set of issues that we're facing, and how do we make that connection between them? That's one. And then the other ones, I've had a lot of experience in the startups that I've made in acquisitions or roll-ups. And especially now, that there's companies that are doing stuff across the region, it's how do you grow inorganically through channels. So I built Certica, the company that I built, has like the largest channel distribution in Latin America for any technology. So it's how to work with channel partners, how to build alliances, how to grow inorganically, how to establish salespeople, across the region and so forth.
Okay, great.
A lot of it, and then at the end it's network. So like we have in our advisory team, people that have built, great companies that have expertise in, like I said, customer success, design, user experience, a lot of it, especially in fintech, capital markets. I think a lot of people think fintech is a product. Fintech also has the capital market side, like raising capital for loans, for working capital. So that whole space also.
Okay. Okay, that's great. We talked about it before in a previous conversation, but I know that there's a little bit more compliance and regulatory requirements for companies that are operating in multiple countries and Central and South America. What's the proper structure for these companies to receive funding from investors, and some compliance things that you might be aware of that people might not be thinking about?
Yeah, so I have a fun expression. I say, like, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an accountant. So make sure that your lawyers and accountants, you get the right ones that are startup or emerging company lawyers, because we've seen some companies say like, oh, my uncle is a lawyer, he does something else, he does like medical malpractice and he's going to help me out. Especially when you're going international, you might be missing out on issues like taxes, which are huge. So there's tax specialists for startups. Early Growth probably has a practice around here too that does helps you structure the right system. For example, if most of your revenue is going to come outside the US, and should you really have a Delaware C corp, or there's options like Cayman or UK, which offer almost the exact same structure without having to declare US taxes, which might lead to your investors having to do withholding. So you just have to understand what you're doing. At the end of the day, if you're operating locally, if you have local teams, you have to set up local subsidiaries. So it's a pretty straightforward process, but just make sure you have the right structure on top, because there's great examples of companies that did this. One just recently had an exit. There was a $200 million tax bill to the US, to the IRS, a company that never had a US employee, a US investor, or even a dollar of US revenue.
Yeah, the tax piece, getting the compliance in order, and some of the strategy for minimizing your tax burden when an exit is achieved is certainly something you want to get a jump on early on, for sure.
Yeah, and you can't fix it after. It's once it's done, and if you try to undo it, the IRS is going to say, "Oh, you fixed it later." No, you set it up like this. So how much of that tax, tax hit is due to that? So you'll never get away with it.
Yeah, they want their piece of the pie for sure. walk me through, I know we talked a lot about successes, walk me through an investment that you've made that failed, and what did you learn from that? How did that help you grow as an investor going forward?
Yeah, I can think of one in particular, which, I think again, you mentioned product, team, space, but you can be right, but you can be right way too early. So we invested in this company that when I was at Hattery, it's very similar to Patreon, where you, if you like a creator, a content creator, an artist, you can, support them. It was probably like done way too early. We also like piggybacked out of, what's the blogging platform that Yahoo bought that was like huge in the late 2000s?
It's not Reddit, no.
No, that was like very popular with like alternative content, music.
Not a blogger, so
I forgot, but yeah, I mean, it was very popular with like alternative music, or like, people doing like art. So kind of like rode on that wave, that platform. Then, after it was bought by Yahoo, it kind of like peaked and then went down. But one thing that we learned, I mean, the product was great, the concept was great, the founder was great. One thing that we learned there is like, it was always just like a little bit more. And we, invested in it. At Hatter, we also had a team of like UX designers, so we kept working with them. We should have realized, hey, the product is great, but the demand is not there yet. We thought it made a lot of sense. We thought the platform was great, but, not getting that early traction and working too much on the product, I think that's what we learned. So again, the learning there is like, early traction needs to tell you what you're building, not the other way around. So don't build for a future traction, build for the traction you have now, and then you continue to grow.
Yeah, build upon the traction you're already seeing. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about team. Obviously, Tumblr was it? Yeah, okay, that sounds right. We talked about team a little bit, and I know at the early stages, really, that's a big part of the investment is assessing the team, right? Have you made investments into, single founder companies? And the second part of that is what about a founding team or a founder do you really like, and what kind of are the key success points of a successful founder that you know?
Yeah, so we've invested in single founder companies. We just not invested in single founder teams, which is a huge difference, right? So one of the companies that we've invested in has one solo founder, but by the time we invested in him, he already had like 12 people on his team that he had brought together, through kind of both bootstrapping, and he had an exit earlier, so he paid, he was kind of his own earlier investor. Because it's less team, less founding team, it's more the team you're building, right? Founding team is very important, but founding team will only take you, from here to there. It's the ability for that founding team or founder to hire, to inspire, to grow the team. So one thing we like to see is also, kind of those first early hires and how they're doing. But I mean, being a solo founder, I think it's not an issue as long as you're able to build a team around yourself.
Yeah, put the right people around you to help you be successful. Absolutely.
Yeah.
How hands-on are you with your companies? Are you checking in monthly, weekly? What does that process look like for you? And how often are you speaking with your founders?
Yeah, no, like once every week or a couple of weeks. A lot of times it's like, hey, I saw this thing, that's interesting. You might be interested in it. It's not like a lot of people, again, it goes away the same thing that I mentioned in the board. Like a lot of founders, sometimes if they're not experienced, will confuse communication with instruction or request. So if you send them stuff, I need to analyze, I need to have a response. It's like, oh, this is something cool. Take a look at it if you want, or, let's talk about it when you're ready. But we do check like bi-weekly I think at the least. A lot of it is like, hey, we're working. We also ask them for, hey, we're working on something what we did a couple of weeks ago with the head of customer success for Facebook. She helped us out and she did a workshop with a number of our companies. So what I'm asking them now is like, hey, it's one of my old co-founders runs the design for a huge part of Google. Do you want to do a design workshop? Who should you invite? Or do we want to talk to a person that runs sales at this like big SaaS company, and we should have a conversation with him because you're building out a sales practice, for example.
Okay. Interesting. You talked a little bit about it too, and I know we're running, short on time. So feel free, everyone, to, put some questions in the chat box as we're kind of approaching the end of this. I'd be curious to understand, you talked a little bit about it, especially like infrastructure for Central and South American, South America. What are you excited about? Like what verticals, what industries are, really have your attention, and do you see there being the most kind of disruption that's, coming in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, so two areas, there's a number of areas, but one area where we're truly focused is the financial services, fintech. In Latin America, fintech in the US, a lot of it is you're competing against banks. In Latin America, less than 30% of people are fully banked or formally banked. So you're not just competing, you're building a market, you're growing, and you have a huge potential for impact. So that's one. Education. So there's this fund called GSV. They have this awesome moniker. They call it like BCAD, before Corona, after disease. And the huge, creative destruction happening in education, and not just like K to 12 or higher education. I'm talking about skills-based education. One of the companies we invested in, Aprende Institutes, based in Miami, their market in US Hispanic is huge. They're teaching this whole generation of US Hispanic citizens on how to build out a business. It's like basic skills like, baking for working in bakeries, or solar installation, machinery repair, et cetera, et cetera. So that's, again, that's more skills-based education. And finally, in infrastructure, what I call the logistics space. So trade, you're seeing what's happening, between US and China. I think that relation is going to continue to be fraught. So a lot of trade is going back to the Americas, Mexico, Brazil. So warehousing, distribution, transportation, a lot of logistics tech space. It goes away from freight forwarding to last mile.
Got it. Okay. I have one question. I'm not 100% sure if I understand it fully, but how often do investors typically expect payments after an investment is made? Monthly, quarterly, annually?
I'm not sure. I think, it could be answered, it could be interpreted both ways, the question. One way is like, if we invest in a company, 99% of the times the investment's made upfront, right? And because you're selling part of your equity. So, here's X% of your company, here's X amount of dollars. The question might be related to some like non-dilutive financing, or sometimes we have lines of credit or drawing downs. If you're talking from the other side, an LP investing in a fund, typically, that's a venture capital. It's a private equity instrument. It's not like a coupon with a bond where you have periodic payments. What you typically see, and again, this is typical, is 3 years, fund that has 10-year life, 3 years of investment period, in which case a commitment of, let's say, $1 million to make it, run numbers. The VCs will draw down between 20 and 25% per year. The first few years it goes down, and then returns to investors happening usually around year 5. Again, if there's an exit of a company you invested right away, you might see them earlier, but it's usually, it looks like a J-curve, right? It's like you make investments and that money gets invested. When the money grows, there's what do you call the TVPI, but it's unrealized gains, and then exits happen usually the second half of the fund. And again, the typical return of a fund is between 2.5 to 3. Some funds have like 5x, and then IRRs between 18 to 30%, depending on the schedule of payments.
Right. Okay. A lot of my questions really have been answered. You mentioned earlier, you know, that you do workshops, I think you said weekly, you know, what
I
was
mean,
the
usually monthly.
monthly?
And we were open. I mean, I do weekly check-ins, but monthly workshops.
Okay. And what was the contact info to get, you know, set up on the workshops if anyone's interested in that?
Oh no, those are I mean, those are for portfolio companies because we do them
Okay.
like very like, you know, like I said, head of product at Fintech. But it's really easy to get a hold of me. If you look me up on Twitter, I think my office hours are posted there, or I repost them periodically. So I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. What I used to do back in like pre-pandemic days is like I literally say like I'm gonna sit at the, you know, lobby at SF MoMA for Sour, come meet me here. Right nowadays it's just do it virtually.
Yeah, and I noticed you do a lot of mentoring for 500 startups. Are you still doing a lot of early stage mentoring as well?
Yeah, I mean, I try to do as much as possible. I mean, obviously, a lot of times it's, you know, nowadays we have companies will obviously, what is it, like give preference for companies. They have like, you know, we have a limited amount of time, but I do this a lot of times to help. Particularly, you know, there's a huge opportunity for underrepresented founders, Latins in the US, Latin American founders. So I try to help as much as possible.
Okay. And you mentioned it earlier too. Do you ever, and does the company have to be Latin led, or
No, I mean, but it has to have a Latin angle, right?
Yep.
A lot of companies, like I've seen a few companies which, you know, international founders that are targeting Latin America. There's a very good company in payments in Mexico that is led by two Indians that, you know, saw an opportunity in Mexico, particularly on trade financing. And there's a company that's doing amazingly well. I think they received money from Dalus and from General Atlantic. So you have to be solving a real problem in Latin America for Latin Americans in the US.
Great. Okay. Well, you know, I want to be respectful of your time. We're about 15 minutes over. We started a bit late with technical difficulties. So I appreciate everyone's patience. Especially appreciate you, Luis, for your time. It's been a pleasure kind of chatting with you and getting to know you. Would love, you know, if there's any follow-up, feel free to shoot anyone from the early growth side a message, and we'll try to get you in contact with them should an introduction be in order. But really, that's it for me, and I want to give you know, you the opportunity to jump off, and you know, again, appreciate your time.
Nah, thank you. Very happy to be here.
Great. Yeah, and thanks to all the partners. We really appreciate you guys making this happen. Gina, I'll pass it back to you to close it out.
No worries. And thank you, David, for everything. And Luis, thank you as well. As David said, thank you so much, all of our partners, to our attendees. And just so everyone knows, coming up in April, we will have another one. So it's going to be April 14th. You'll be seeing information regarding that soon. Hope everyone has an amazing Wednesday, and we look forward to seeing you in a month.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, Luis.
Bye.
Appreciate it.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.